welcome to another episode of Gaming at the Round Table with Crystal, Maverick, and myself, JoJo. I'm going to let Mav take off with two quick announcements before we get into our general discussion. Go ahead.
Awesome. I wasn't ready. Let me remind myself real quick. I know I wrote it down. I think it was about our prototypes, yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So announcement one is that we've officially begun work on our second prototype for the month of August, which happens to be Crystal's birthday month. So she will, and I think this ties into the second announcement, and that is that we are also beginning our work on our second owl character that will be featured in our actual fully released non-prototype game. So that's exciting because we get to work on something that's going to be like official. The prototypes are exciting too because we get to expand our skill sets and really push our limits. So all of that being said, we're on schedule. Originally, if you've been following us, we said we'd like to do 3 different prototypes in 3 different months. So we got through the July and that went well. So we're officially in the August and things are on schedule and we're pretty happy about it. So look forward to more news about that towards the end of the month, most likely. And we'll keep you guys posted. Yes. Back to you, Joe.
So the general topic for today is kind of co-op and then how it rolls into a bunch of other topics in gaming as a whole. So the best way that I can put it is, how has co-op changed in gaming, and has it been in a positive sense? And more of how, as an overall thing...
Crystal's shaking her head already. No.
I'm trying to give both sides of the coin here, but again, how has it been positive, and then how has it kind of, for Crystal's sake, backfired on us as a gaming community?
I'm going to start with the positive.
You can go for it then.
Because I got to play devil's advocate because I know all three of us have some negatives. But I will say that we have on record in our podcast already talked about how there has been a significant positive impact in being able to expand your social network, and in many ways positive impacts on mental health because of those connections that we formed. So I do want to say we meant what we said. All good things, all good things.
MMOs are a blessing, okay?
And not just them.
There's just them, but they're one of the biggest blessings as far as growing friendships and stuff like that, in my opinion, as far as a co-opable game, because you can co-op with up to depending on the content, right? I could get 23 other, not that I have 23 other friends, but I could get 23 other friends and go into a dungeon in Final Fantasy. That's cool. Or we could run around the world and wreak havoc.
Yeah. And there's countless stories of people who are like, oh, I met on this online video game and then we ended up married, or best friends, or all that kind of, even us. We have long lasting, currently now, in real life friends because we met them through gaming. And they're wonderful people that have stood the test of time better than many of our other friends that we just made in passing.
And they're all nerds.
All of them.
I'll gladly step on the hand grenade of making myself look really, really old. But I want to go back to when co-op kind of started, because when you say MMO, that kind of goes way back. But that's more in the PC realm. When it came to consoles, you had 2 players on one console, and that was kind of your max. You could go over to your friend's house, you could play together, and then the N64 came along, and then you could get 4 people to play together, and that was a big step up.
And you were playing on a 32-inch screen.
Yeah, and it was real small.
Split into 4.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just kind of like the piece of the pie. But I think the PlayStation had a little connector that could allow you to do it, but it wasn't very sturdy.
It definitely wasn't common either.
So I think N64, as just gaming in general, opened the door. And again, this is pre-consoles being internet. Otherwise, you had PC. In PC back then, if you were a gamer, you either had money or you knew how to build it from absolute scratch, and you can kind of piece things together. And then I think the Xbox kind of opened the door for online co-op in the sense of just huge volume. I remember the first time you could play with 6 other people or 12 people, and it made it seem so drastic.
Yeah, that's interesting because esports was kind of kicking off around that era. So esports was an co-op, right? So playing with other people in terms of co-op. Esports, you had your competitiveness where you had like those 2-player co-op games that were just played very competitively. So
Street
Street Fighter
Fighter, Mortal
was
Kombat.
huge. It was almost like underground fist
Yeah.
fighting, but it was a bunch of nerds who were hosting these tournaments, and there are famous clips of people. It was incredible stuff that they were doing. Then you had a whole different type of esports emerging, which was, you mentioned computers, right? So real-time strategy games, which are not as popular currently. There's one that just came out. I really want to try. I forget the name of it. It's in our chat somewhere, but they're not super popular. In fact, I could guarantee several people who might end up listening to this would be like, "What's a real-time strategy game?" Right? Whereas in the era when co-op started to really become, that was one of the only types of games people played. So you had your StarCraft, your Command and Conquer, a couple other army ones, but
Ages of Empire.
There
right,
you go.
Civilization, those types of games, those were like 30% of the market was RTS.
Mm-hmm.
So of course those were competitive. Uh, there was some co-op. I personally really enjoyed doing like in any of those games, but I'll use StarCraft as the example where you'd play against 2 real people, or you'd play with a real person against 2 computers or 3 computers, um, or however many the game would allow you to play against, and you could set their difficulty, and that was really fun. And then the third type of co-op esports thing that started to emerge, and you touched on this, Joe, was the Xbox. I'm going to say
LAN
it,
parties.
Xbox. Exactly. They had their era, and I'm going to even just say Halo primarily changed the landscape of both cooperative and PvP, and that's got a gray area between the two. Um, I'm going to ramble, so I'm going to be quiet for a second.
Because yeah, you mentioned Halo, and I just remember the leap that it made. The fact that again, it went from the N64 4 players to you could LAN connect it with an Ethernet cord. Then you had 8 people, but then you had the screen watchers. So that was kind of the original wall
Yeah.
hacking when we were kids. Don't look at my screen. I know you're looking at my screen, and I mean you throw hands sometimes if you got that serious. But I remember competing. I think I was a freshman in college, and I think Halo 2 was coming out, and the local game store was hosting like a local tournament. And I
Mhm.
remember it was on small little screens. So what they did is they divvied it up so there wasn't more than 2 per screen to make it more fair. And I think I got like second place, and I won like a copy of the game. And I thought I was the best gamer in the world, but in the grand scheme of things, it was really minute and small, but it just added to a really cool gaming experience. And even then, this is in 2004 or five, so you were still considered kind of nerdy to play games. So to compete in gaming, people were like, "Why would you do that? You can't make money."
Mhm.
But when you look at it now, because I
Come
remember
on.
one of the people that I followed, I can't remember his name, but he was one of the first people who did competitive esports, and he made like I think it was $80,000 a year doing it.
And in the early 2000s, 80 G's a year was nothing to scoff at,
Yeah, it was
especially if you
considerable.
were young playing video games. Like, that was mind boggling.
Yeah.
So you had touched on it, but I'd like to present it as a question: is how do you consider co-op in the sense of either PvE, meaning that you're playing kind of the story of the game with friends, like Final Fantasy, where you're in a dungeon with 24 people and you're not fighting other human people, but you're playing the game and the story, compared to where you're battling other people, where it's a more PvP and it's not necessarily the story aspect of the game. It's more of a mode, which we
I've,
kind of talked about
mhm.
off screen, but I kind of
Yeah.
figured to open that up a little bit.
What you just said reminded me that there is a shining star example of a game that does both, and does both, in my opinion, really well. And I find them rare. So, as a series, I think that Diablo did a pretty good job, especially in its prime years, of doing both PvE and PvP content. Because a lot of games in its era, if they were doing PvP, well, you didn't have a choice. It's a PvP game. Good luck. Uh, Diablo was the first time I recall playing a game where PvP was a big factor, but was also pretty much 100% optional. And you wanted to do it, and so you would try it out.
That actually reminds me, I tried a game recently, thanks to my friend Adelia, who I met online. She introduced me to Once Human, and we were creating our characters to be on the same world as each other so we could play together. Well, you can pick which world you want to play on based on what you want to do. So, say you go on X world, you would just be doing survival mode. So, simple. You could also pick B world where it's like survival mode but PvP. So, you would fight other people. Now, we didn't pick that because we want to have fun, not have our base get destroyed every 5 minutes. But
like Ark Survival, I think is a big thing in that one.
right, and I just found that interesting that you could pick rather than being stuck and forced into, okay, well, no matter what, if you play this game, you're gonna have to fight other people. Because again, like you were saying, there are games where they only gave you that one option. A lot of the newer games are like, well, some people don't like that, and they would like the game if that just wasn't part of the game. So let's make some of our servers for those people as well. And they're bringing in more people that way.
Yeah, that reminds me. I always felt it was a shame that not fighting games don't really have cooperative modes. I'm sure there's some somewhere, but not any that come to mind. Where there are a lot of fighting games that I think are aesthetically very pleasing that I could convince other people to try. And as soon as they hear it's a fighting game, they're like, no, I won't play it. Even people like yourselves that are big into PvP oriented game modes, like what do they call them? The shooter games.
Battle Royale.
Battle Royale. Thank you. Those are hugely popular, but I know a lot of people who play those but still refuse the one-on-one fighting games just because it's so infuriating when if you find an opponent that can beat you, well, you know how the next match is going to go.
They're hacking.
For Honor is a game, I compare it to like Souls-like games where I cannot play it because it's so condensed in the sense of it's 4-on-4, but it's more one-on-one than any other type of game in that realm, and it's a fighting game. And I'm one of those people when it comes to certain mechanics, it infuriates me because I can be stomping somebody and then they just time one little counter right and it's all out the window. And I'm like, I can't play it. Like, even my wife knows, like, that game is not allowed in the house because I will break things. It's so bad.
A game that did both co-op and PvP really well, even though I was really, really bad at it, is Guild Wars 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
Guild Wars 2 is
their
very
PvP
good.
Was really solid. I liked their maps and the amount of people versus people, because I think it wasn't that many.
You had different modes. Sorry, I was a Guild Wars. I was huge into. I actually also did a competitive tournament in that.
Yeah, he introduced me to Guild Wars 2. That's where I
used to play it with him.
Stepped my toe into MMOs in general.
They did a really great thing because it was an MMO that didn't have the Holy Trinity, right? You didn't have tank, healer, DPS. And so that in and of itself was different. And then when it came to PvP, you had like a buffet of choices. You could choose between doing very small scale, 4 to 5 verse 4 to 5. And then you could do huge scaled where you'd have effectively armies worth of people roaming the map and stuff like that. And so you kind of had whatever flavor of PvP you preferred, it was available.
You only let me try a little bit of the PvP then.
Yeah, well,
I remember
you were keyboard
1v1
turning at the time, so
Hey! I remember 1v1ing you, and I think I won one of the times though.
These are lies. These are lies.
That's not a
It's
lie.
like I beat my dad at ping pong once. That's one time is all I needed. One time. Tears in my eye, just smack. I win. I never played him again.
It's like when you
Same.
lose in a fighting game and someone's like, all right, let's go get pizza or something. Let's do something else. Like, no, you won once, dude.
So I'm going to use again the topic, but I'm going to bring it to the current gen of things and how co-op now is also cross-platform and kind of the Pandora's box that opened. Because you cannot, which I think the initial idea was very positive. Because I remember I'm mainly Xbox, their PlayStation, and there were certain games because they were exclusives, you couldn't play with each other.
Yep.
So when the idea of cross-platform came around, and then I could be on an Xbox, and my brother could be on a PlayStation, and we could play together, I thought that was really cool. And again, that's the co-op in the sense of we're PvE, we're playing against the story or monsters or whatever.
Yeah.
But now you have the competitive realm, and especially in the battle royale space, but you're also cross-platform. And again, it is Pandora's box when it comes to cross-platform inside of that realm. You guys have points on that one?
Yeah, I'm going to start with a great example of that where people waited a long time. So Warframe is a pretty popular game. At least historically, it's been very popular. I remember being super excited when they announced that they were going to do cross-platform because I was playing on either PlayStation or computer, and we had friends that were playing on computer, right? So I wasn't going to take my account that I had spent hundreds of hours in and just be like, well, I want to play with my friends, so I'm just going to start from scratch on this other console. And it's like, no, there's no way I'm going to do that. No matter how cool I think my friends are, it's just not worth that time investment. And so when they finally did that, it was just kind of, this is the future, but it's now. And of course, what Joe was saying earlier, all the time, if we ever found titles that were literally cross console between like Xbox servers and PlayStation servers, it was like a diamond in the sand. It was so rare, but so awesome to try. And you just hope the game is good. So I think it's a good thing. You started the podcast by saying, has it been a positive or negative trend? I think Crystal was shaking her head no at the start, but really cooperative play and how it's evolved, I think that specifically has been overwhelmingly positive. The negatives all come from corporate greed.
Yeah, I was about to get into that. Let me at him. Let me at him.
You're up to bat, kid.
So, something that I didn't like is back in my day, you could buy a game and play with your friends. Now you have to buy multiple copies, right? Because every person has to have it on their individual systems or consoles or whatever. And that includes my husband and I. We live in the same house. We own 2 PlayStations because in order for us to play together, we need 2 PlayStations to play together.
Yeah.
There is very, very few games where you could sit on the couch and play together. And we know that because we try to find games all the time to play with. Now, Nintendo does it pretty well. I will admit that. But we like to kill stuff.
Yeah. Nintendo has great games. They're family games.
Right.
But sometimes you don't want to play a family game.
No. I mean, most of the time, we don't. We like to... We've said this like a million times recently. Medieval fantasy. I think that's like our go-to genre of things. And finding games like that couch co-op.
I can only think of maybe 3 off the top of my head.
It Takes Two. It's couch co-op. I've never played it, but I've heard really good things. Diablo. Yeah.
Baldur's Gate.
Diablo did everything well.
Diablo. So Back when I first played Diablo, unfortunately, I kind of had it a little spoiled because I played with Maverick and he already had like super maxed out, jacked up, on steroids characters. And here I was, this lowly little person. So we would be playing together, and as you know, the screen moves. So you basically have to stay together. If you don't stay together, screen like gets really weird, whatever. So I would leave to go to the bathroom or something, and my character's gone up like 50 levels, or I'd look at my phone for 5 minutes, play Candy Crush, and there's another 50 levels, and because you could just tote me around. It was really weird. Leveling. Yeah, and I didn't like that. I like games where I have to work for it on my own.
Well, they've gotten pretty good at power scaling characters, so even if somebody's considerably higher level than you, it power scales even the people that you're battling against, so that way it's a little more even.
Yeah.
The First Ascendant is a game that I've been playing recently. It does that pretty well, so even if you have somebody in your group that's considerably higher, they'll power level you to a degree, but if you get too high up there, you're gonna get stomped real quick.
So it's like Final Fantasy with their gear. Final Fantasy 14, where if you go into a lower level dungeon, it caps how high your gear can be.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty neat.
So there are challenges with cross-platform play. So kind of going between cross-platform and cooperative play in general. One of the challenges, and we have a little list, right? So small cheat sheet of topics here. I'm going to start with the first one, fair play. And it's obviously the most pressing concern. So I have an example where this was done well. No, I don't. Someone else talk.
Okay, so I'm going to take the flip side of this because me and Crystal both play Battle Royales pretty consistently. And in one game in particular, it is extremely unbalanced. And it's not to take a shot at them because we like the game. They've done some stuff recently that was a little questionable, but Apex as a whole, especially in the ranked realm of it, if one person in your party is in a PC lobby, everybody then is pushed into PC lobbies. So when you're playing against PC characters, the most unfair thing is just movement alone. The ability of PC players to move compared to controller players, it's night and day. Like you will see characters that are generally kind of clunky and big targets move around like they're on skates.
They also, in Apex Legends, I just want to mention this real quick, recently nerfed the aim assist that the controller has in order to compensate for mouse and keyboard.
Because that's always the first thing computer players are going to say. Well, you guys have aim assist. It's like, does aiming matter if you're behind me and I can't turn around?
It's like trying to say like it helps you shoot a duck that's flying at Mach 1. Like
it's more like, does aiming matter if I'm standing still while looting a box and you're over there moving 20 miles per hour while looting the same box? Like, there's small differences that make computer just so much better. And to kind of change away from Apex really quick.
I wasn't even talking about Apex, just shooters in general. Yeah.
Well, something else that's kind of unfair with computers, with consoles specifically, is modding.
Yes. We touched on that a little
crazy. Bit. Yeah, on PC. And if you're doing something with somebody else in a competitive manner, you can actually mod some of those games. Like, I've never done that kind of modding. No. I've only done, like, cutesy, Stardew Valley.
Yeah, I remember the first time being in a Diablo thing.
Yeah, you could mod that one pretty heavy.
You can cheat in Diablo even on a console, but it's way more difficult.
Yeah.
Tremendously more difficult. And usually it's more like duplicating items type cheating and less changing your health to be infinite, changing your damage to be infinite, and movement speed and all that kind of stuff, because you don't have access to the source code. On a computer, if you're savvy enough or dedicated enough, or your Google Foo is strong, you
Your Google
you
what?
can
Google
Google
Foo.
Foo.
I love
Google
that.
Foo. Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, you haven't heard that one, huh?
No.
I did not make it, unfortunately. It's a common term. Yeah, you can cheat on a computer tremendously, period. And it's also incredibly easy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know anyone personally. Maybe one of you guys will enlighten me. I cannot name a single person I have ever met that told me a story about how they hacked a game on their PlayStation or their Xbox or their Switch.
The only options for that, and it's not necessarily hacking in that sense, is that you can get mods to your controller.
Yeah.
Or you can get like a little plug-in type thing that adds in those things.
Yes.
Zen is one of them.
And those are actually getting...
They're getting banned. PlayStation banned, I think it was Zen. But
Mm-hmm.
you used to be able to hook these up, and it would, because like on some games where you fire a weapon, it gives you kickback and recoil, and like you have to control that with one of your sticks. So what this does is it does recoil smoothing. So instead of going across, you start to shoot, even if it's a heavier gun, you're going pew, 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 instead of and where you have to correct that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're
Our
thinking,
sound guy, ladies and gentlemen.
so if you're thinking in a competitive sense and you're trying to like recoil smooth on your own and figure that out and figure out your settings, this thing does it for you.
Yeah.
And that's the console's way of cheating.
The comparison between the two is just obscene. Yeah, computers is just a whole different level of cheating capable. And they do. Every game where you can cheat, there are cheaters. And so that's the big issue with cooperative cross-platform play is how do you make it fair? Especially, so we have a couple more bullet points. Server stability is an issue. That I don't want to go in depth in because it's more technical and like push up your glasses type conversation, but it is an issue that people need to address. Hardware and control compatibility. Joe was just talking about this where you can have add-ons on controllers that can assist, but computers can obviously like
I mean,
they have some advanced stuff, right? Like
my mouse has like what,
Those are
12
hotkeys.
buttons?
just on the side, right?
Yeah, that I can make them do whatever I want them to do, right?
For anyone only listening, Crystal was holding up her
right.
MMO gaming mouse, a G600. We're not sponsored yet.
Logitech, I love you though.
Yes, please sponsor us.
Holds up my
And please keep
keyboard.
making their G700s. You stop that. I'd like some more, please. So hardware control capability. We also had just outright cheating in general as a cross-platform topic where it's wonderful that we can play cross-platform, but I don't want to play computers because one, they have an advantage and they are also more likely to be cheating. And we've all experienced it where someone just rolls you and they're clearly cheating. I've taken clips on Fortnite, which is like a really not high bar level of competitiveness. And just people cheat, period. Esports standardization. Esports can be its own podcast. And I even wrote that as a point. And we've touched on it here and there and even during today's discussion. But esports, I think, is the biggest challenge when it comes to cross-platform because we're finally getting to an era where a lot of games are cross-platform, like right out the gate. So that's a big win. But how do you standardize that when it comes time for tournaments?
I actually think that most of the people, if not all of the people, that compete in esports are on computer.
Mm-hmm.
I've absolutely seen esports people using a controller, but they were
they
all
hook
using
the controller
controllers
to their PC.
On the computer. Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's rare that you get, unless it's the old school LANs where they bring like their actual system with them and then hook up to the network that they're playing on, which I think is a more fair way of doing it because they have more control of what's there. And obviously, if you have your system, they can tell if you've done anything to it. Whatever. If you look at PCs, because it's open, and this just happened in Apex, they got hacked during a tournament, like live.
Yeah.
And
I
it wasn't just
remember
one
that,
person; it was multiple people got hit by it. So esports as a whole and trying to standardize it, that's a flip of a coin.
Yeah. There's been a modern shift in how we think about co-op, and Joe and I have consistently talked about, well, back in our day, this is kind of what co-op was about, and it's obviously changed over time. So we've touched that topic in many different angles, but one that we haven't touched much is this notion that just like fashion, the gaming industry does seem to be circling back on itself to the roots of cooperative play.
Thankfully, I'm so excited for that. Although, one thing I will say, because we're almost out of time here, do you guys remember when you would do couch co op, but it used to be you're the two players, but only one player was playing and the other player was following at the time? And then once
Sonic.
that player dies, then the second player gets to play?
No, I
Oh,
don't know
you
if it was
mean like
Sonic
house
directly.
rules? Like you're not
No,
talking about
no,
how the
no.
game.
I'm talking
Yeah.
like, so for instance, the game I'm specifically talking about is Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah, I remember that.
One would be Donkey Kong, the other one would be Diddy,
Diddy, yeah.
and Donkey Kong was the only one in control until Donkey Kong died. And then Diddy would take over, and whoever's playing Diddy would play.
But you could alternate, I think.
You could switch it out if you wanted to with the press of a button.
Yeah, then yeah, Sonic was like that too.
Yeah, but most of the time you would just,
You've been playing for a while. Make a mistake.
Yeah, like distractions, stuff like that. Man, that was the good old days. It was so simplistic back then when you used to play co-op like that. And then it got really complicated.
I know we're running up against time here, but I do want to cite some examples, or at least talk a little bit about how we've started to come full circle on how co-op and online play has shifted from where it went to where it's at now, and how it's kind of making its way back to its origins. You guys, before the podcast, mentioned that even Apex was doing something kind of similar, where it wasn't strictly all PvP.
Yeah, they added in a new mode for their newest season, which came out this week. That they have a mode where you can battle against bots. And it's strictly bots, so it's not something that I think it added to the learning curve of the game, because that was something that was very hard for new players. Is the learning curve was drastic because of the skill level. So if you were a new person, you hopped into a lobby, even if it was pubs, you're going against Preds, Masters, Diamond, like high level players, and you're just like a little mouse. And you're like, I'm just trying to learn how to walk. Boom, you're done. Now you can play against bots and kind of figure out the game.
And it feels super solid. This is something I was talking about with my cousin. The bots aren't just like... The only other bots I can really compare it to is Fortnite. So when you're playing the Fortnite bots, you know that is a bot. Because they just run into walls, start breaking the walls. Like they're bots. Whereas in Apex, they do things that are questionable, but they use their abilities. I had a bot throw an ultimate at me. Like, what? I had bombs coming down on me because of a bot. It knew when to do things. Like, it smoked itself out. The bots are very advanced in Apex. And you could tell that it's a stepping stone because they don't, like, mow you down. They miss a lot of their shots. But they're still using their abilities. They're still doing things that a real person would do in those moments. So I thought that was really cool.
So it's like playing other really fresh, new players that don't know what they're doing yet.
Yes.
And the irony, I think, about all this is that if they wanted to, developers would absolutely roll everybody with computers. An AI will stomp terribly any human player. It won't even be a competition. So it's kind of funny how we talk about bots being like the worst.
I've died in the firing range in Apex many times from getting overwhelmed. So they could definitely kill you.
Yeah.
They did their bot simulation thing really well.
Oh, you see it too. Like, we like to think about that type of thing in the training modes as like, the fill in the gaps for those types of games. We like to think of those as like separate, but they're the same concept behind when Crystal and I played Helldivers 2 and we zone in and we're like, we're getting annihilated. These freaking robots are everywhere and they do so much damage. And they just never stop shooting me. Please, there's no cover. Like, you're screwed. You're dead. You're so dead without a huge, like a squad with you or something like that. Yeah. So I just wanted to give props to the devs that, like, when they make these AI dumb, but dumb enough to be good for training, that takes a lot of forethought. And so kudos to them for that.
Now, I will say I need to take somebody in who isn't experienced in Apex to really see how good it is. Because to me, I mean, it's good. But I need to take somebody who doesn't really play Battle Royales that much into it to see what they think. So
again, we're going a little long, but
yes.
I think there might be one more example that we could hopefully cite other than Apex. Because I know our podcast tends to use the games that we play frequently as the examples at hand. So can you guys think of anything else that off the top of your head, so putting us all on the spot, where the co-op or online gaming is starting its cyclical trend back to something that was popular in the past?
I think I can use it pretty quick. It's the First Descendant, because they base the game purely on co-op. And it's so fluid, it's actually impressive. So you can drop into a map, and there's multiple missions per section of the map, and you can literally walk up to the beacon to initiate the thing, or you can see somebody already in the current battle, whatever it is, walk over and just start helping them. And then it pulls you into the mission, and it becomes co-op instantly.
I love that example.
Genshin Impact would be an example as well.
Games we don't play a lot.
I mean, I don't play it anymore.
Well, what's the example? Go ahead.
It's the same thing.
What do you mean?
You go into an instance and you play together.
Okay. She meant as far as like the fluidity of being co-op,
yeah.
not that it's the same automatic back to co-op.
You're right. I really liked Joe's example because it reminded me of the notion of, I distinctly remember not liking the fact that online game for a period of many years, double-digit years, shifted towards, if we were talking about a popular online game, we were effectively talking about a game where you kill each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
PvE.
Or no, PvP.
Oh, PvP, right? People versus people. For anyone that doesn't know those terms, PvE is people versus enemy. PvP, people versus people. That was online gaming for a good 10 years recently. So hearing about instancing into something, seeing someone already participating, and you're not in a traditional MMO like Final Fantasy or World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2, but in a shooter game, it's really cool to hear how you don't have to just start a completely fresh instance of whatever's going on and still be able to join somebody else. That is a really nice return to that focus on online cooperativeness that I feel we moved away from as an industry, and only recently are people trying to get back towards that. So good job, First Descent. Okay, I will try the First Descendant in a meaningful way this time, because it sounds like it's going to be up my alley. So, all right, Joe, take us away.
All right, that was another episode of Gaming at the Round Table. Thank you for joining us with Crystal, Maverick, and myself, Jojo.
See ya.